Hello and welcome to the Big Problems Little Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Barry Scott, and I'm a copywriter, marketer and environmentalist. I love the outdoors, grew up watching David Attenborough and wanted to be like Jane Goodall when I was older. There's still time, but right now I'm fortunate enough to work with lots of very smart people who are trying to make the world a better place in lots of different ways. The goal of this podcast is to shine a light on all of the little solutions out there to a lot of the big problems we're facing. Today we have Maja Paleka on the podcast, and Maja started her professional life with an engineering degree, then moved into the corporate world where she made a mark rather quickly, winning the Young Manager of the Year award from the Australian Institute of Management while working at Singtel. Moving up the ranks, she found herself drawn more and more into the strategy and leadership side of the business, and it's here that she really found her calling. With extensive leadership experience in engineering, sales and operations across 3 continents, she eventually left to co-found a business focused on managing inequality. Then became a certified organisational coach and a leadership consultant. Now she helps organisations of all sizes manage the uncertain world that we live in today, helping leaders stay focused on what really matters by combining her engineering background with a deep understanding of human behaviour. So, welcome to the podcast, Maja.
Thanks so much, Barry. Thank you.
Hi, how are you doing today? All right?
Yeah, really good. It's a sunny day in gorgeous Sydney. It's not too ridiculously hot yet, so I'm all good.
Yes, no, it's nice down here too. It was freezing this morning. It seems to be awfully cold in the mornings and then it warms up. I don't know what's going on at the moment. But
see, I don't mind that. The Canadian in me still loves a little bit of like chill overnight, a little bit of crispness and freshness in the morning, and then I'm okay to get hot later on.
Yes, I know what you mean. The coldness, obviously, I'm sure folks can tell I'm from Scotland, so yes, it's a similar thing. But listen, let's. I'm always find it quite interesting today with people who come on here. Often have got sort of interesting backgrounds. So you started off in engineering, which is very precise, and everything works, I would imagine, exactly as it should do. And then you found yourself moving into people who really do not often act or react the way that you would expect. So how do you ever wonder how on earth did that happen, or how did you sort of combine these precise and quite unprecise areas? How did you get here?
It's honestly a really interesting question, and there's probably many different kind of ways to think about it, I guess, if it makes sense. Somebody said to me ages ago, because I absolutely loved both, and my brain can sort of love the making sense, the understanding how something works type thing, and then also I love the messiness, the unpredictability, the kind of of human beings, right? So, and it was someone, a mentor of mine, who said, well, it kind of makes sense. Maybe you just like to understand how things work and then kind of really get into it. So that probably the dorkiness, the curiosity of really understanding how things work is the common thread and the theme probably between the two. But honestly, the story probably is a lot simpler. I was just one of those kids who loved to study, loved to learn. That was kind of something that, was not too hard, the school side of things. I also come from an Eastern European background, so, good grades and good marks is something that is highly valued and that we all really, really focus on. And so, math and science and everything else came easy. If I look back, really, I never really loved it, but I was good at it. Yeah. But what I loved and what I really deeply would lose myself for hours in is reading fiction. And if I kind of think about it, the fiction bit is all about characters for me. It wasn't about the plot. I didn't really care what happened, but it was about the beings kind of in there. So both of those things.
Why did they do these things, or why did they do these things, or what drives people?
Yeah, absolutely. And the more irrational the characters were and the more unpredictable, the more I loved them, right? So it was probably little clues everywhere. But again, my family were refugees to Canada from former Yugoslavia when the war started there. And again, as I said, the story is simpler. My dad was an engineer. I applied both to psychology and engineering and got accepted to both. And then we had a bit of a conversation where he sat me down one day and said, "What's with this psychology thing, honey?"
Really? Because I did psychology at university too. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Oh my God, I would have loved it. I still will go back and study, but the thing is that when you are living in former Yugoslavia, there weren't that many jobs in psychology, and you weren't necessarily guaranteed to make a decent living, where engineering was something, and especially, you know, as I said, he was an engineer. It was something that's in my grandfather was an engineer. Like, yeah, it was, but it was also very much a respected profession. And it's like, well, you can do this, you're capable of it. Why would you not study it, kind of thing? And to be fair, my dad's career and his profession meant that when we moved to Canada, we established ourselves very easily, right, as refugees, where someone with a different degree that didn't translate very easily, right, because it is, as you said, so predictable, certain ones and zeros. Math is the same in every language.
And
you know, it was
physics
really easy.
is physics. It works the way it works. You know, that's it.
Yeah. So that degree, you know, he could go, and he did. He worked all over the world. So it opened up a lot of opportunity for us and immense stability, immense security. So I think all of those things were in the back of my mind where, you know, probably psychology had a little bit of more question marks just in our family and the perspective and the lens that we came from. But it's just, you know, super easy that within moments of really getting a job, starting to work, in Canada, I just ended up managing people, and that was my favorite part of my job. It was the hardest part of the job, absolutely. You know, ones and zeros and math is easy. It's the hardest part of
anybody's job, really, isn't it?
100%. But also the most rewarding and just deeply purposeful. So, you know, I think it just made sense. I made my way back into the thing where I think I would have anywhere. And at the same time, like, it's not like I regret at all doing engineering. I love science. I am a dork. I still love technology. I'm still in that space. I would get excited about it. So I think the combo of both is kind of my jam. Yeah. So, Great.
Yeah. I wonder, actually, it's because and again, I sort of looked at different things, and I was... I probably had the opportunity to go to art school and also then to go and do business and psychology sort of stuff. And I remember a similar conversation where my parents' influence was like, look, you know, you can go to business and psychology, you can go learn that at university and still do art on the side. But you couldn't do the other way around. You know, you couldn't go to art school and then just do sort of business. And so, you know, I was influenced by that advice. And of course, art just kind of fell away. But there's still a creative thread going through my work. And I wonder now if our influence on our children will be as strong as the parents was on us. I suspect not, to be honest. I think they might not be as influenced by our guidance in that respect. But anyway, it's an interesting thing, right? Because I actually had this conversation with my dad, and he sort of said to me, like, "But I never, like." Said you can't study psychology, right? Yeah. So from his perspective, he thinks he didn't influence me that much at all, right? So I wonder, I don't know, Barry, I don't know. I think that we have way more sway over them than we think we do, and not even in the very overt, obvious things that we say, but in what we value, what we prioritize, what we reward them in, all that kind of other stuff. I see this in my kids sometimes, and I was like, where'd this come from? And then if I'm really honest, I was like, that's me. Yeah. Well, I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. And look, that leads us quite nicely when we're talking about values and what people, you know, how you set an example and all of that. I guess that sort of leads quite nicely into, so I guess sort of what you're kind of doing at the moment, really, which is really, really interesting. And kind of, I'll a wee brief intro and then I'll let you go. Thank you. So we're kind of in a tricky place at the moment, I think, in the world. And obviously, you know, you're sort of seeing a lot of that when you're involved with advising organisations and leadership teams and how to deal with everything that's going on. There's so many changes and all of that. And I know you've been involved with sort of I guess how do you describe it? The sort of get back in the office or not? You know, there's all that going on after COVID. There's AI and there's discrepancies still between men and women with how much they earn and all of that. So you've been doing some work recently and trying to sort of make some sense out of this world that we're in today, and I believe you just launched a white paper. So do you want to give us just a wee quick, a bit of an overview of that, and tell us what's going on there?
Yeah, thank you. I 100% agree with you. The world definitely feels like in a tricky place right now. And I'd probably say that all of this started, even when I'm thinking about last year, every year, you have this long time over Christmas period to sort of sit down and reflect. And I think my brain,
what's going on?
Yeah. My brain tends to marinate. Yeah.
Mm.
I always I call it marinating, right? Like my brain's kind of figuring out and collecting patterns from different places. And the Christmas before last, I was talking a lot about there's this different relationship between employers and employees. There's been a change in it, and there's a tension in it, and nobody can put their finger on it. And last year, we really talked a lot about that changing relationship and some of the frustration there. And then that just sort of didn't go away. It was still something that I could sense, especially, a lot of the work that I do a lot of work in public and private sector across the board. But the bit where I love to play is sort of the small and medium-sized businesses. So where, I get really a chance to speak to all the decision makers, where I'm listening to CEOs. And a lot of the time in some of the conversations that I have, they are in spaces where they are very open and honest about some of the frustrations that they're having. So yeah, that relationship was changing. But I'll be honest, last year, probably around Christmas, we were visiting my family in Canada. I was going through this whole, it was also me going, what is happening? Like, how do we react to the world that we're in, from the environmental impact and the fact that we can't seem to get our stuff together, and the numbers are not necessarily great. And the politicians who are coming into power right around that time seem to care even less, and we're just going to go backwards.
That was last Christmas, then Donald Trump got voted in November, didn't he? So, I mean, that was...
Yep. And that was the thing. I was in North America, and it was very acute in North America.
It was acute everywhere, I think.
100%.
Anyway,
100%.
Yeah, more so over there.
Yeah. We also were feeling the tension of thinking maybe there were some, desires of taking over Canada, which was just so interesting. Yes. But there was the environmental impact, the political impact, just going backwards in so many ways. And then the reflection, as I said, over Christmas in terms of what's going on in organizations. And what I was observing is that in the big end of town, because as you said, a lot of my work tended to be around how do we design organizations that are flexible and flexible working overall. So not just working from home, but overall, what does flexibility look like? Everything from correctional services, right? I've done work in flexibility is possible in those places to, office space and everything else. So we were just going backwards in everything. And it's just one of those things where it's very easy to despair. And it's very easy to lose hope. And then I don't know if it's the, universe kind of sends you these things when you need them and all that kind of other stuff, or I just started finding little bits. I started coming across more and more people who were actually talking about, hold on. It's not about any other big system or a big person in charge or whatever else driving the changes that need to happen. It's actually about every single one of us and how do all we play. And this is why I love your podcast, right? Little things and the impact of little things in big changes. And so, that idea of what can we all do and how does that look like in the word where it's very easy to fall back in despair and actually get sucked into the negative narrative, because I was seeing that in leaders especially. But trying to shift that and actually going, no matter what's going on around you.
The whole world. But you can influence your own little sphere a lot easier, which, perhaps is what we all need to do.
100%. And listen, I spent this year, and I'm going to digress for 2 seconds, but I spent this year studying complexity and complexity science. And when you actually look at the scholars and the world that we are in and the difficulty we're in, it is absolutely a complex adaptive system that we're sitting in, or a complex system. It is never changed by one or big two people or big teams or some giant transformation. There's a guy called Robert Kahane, and I hold these little quotes as like little bits of hope in me kind of thing that drives some of the stuff. And he talks about that big systems were never generatively transformed by one big team or a one person. They were transformed by many different people doing many different little things for many different reasons, and kind of getting there. So the power of the little things is important. Mm-hmm. And so it just changed my perspective, I guess, going into this year, that, every single one of us has actually a lot more agency than I think we have to impact the world around us. And it really is, I think, the work, especially for leaders in my mind, but I think every single one of us, no matter what, is not to get sucked into the negativity and because despair doesn't help anything, right? We're useless. Or to sit optimistically and hoping someone else is going to come and save us, right? But to actually be intentional about
because that's not
what
happening.
kind of world do we want to create. Yeah, absolutely. And what kind of world do we want to create in? And specifically in my work, I work with leaders. And so the white paper was all about these are all the things that's going on. It's not necessarily looking that great. We know in terms of employee engagement scores, they're low. People are burnt out. I just listened to a podcast recently, and Brene Brown was like, if you're a people leader, you know that people are not okay. You just know that people, and I hear that all the time. There's lots going on. Our economy is all over the place. Technology is, we're being told it's coming at us, and we need to do something. I don't know if you've seen it. It's going all over LinkedIn. It's like CEOs, what do we want? AI. When do we want it? Now. What do we want it for? We don't know. Right? This seems to be the kind of thing that's going on out there, right? And so all of this is happening, sure. And so it's very, very easy in that environment, because we are a biology, we're human beings, to get sucked into that narrative. And then we get into what's, in research they call the scarcity mindset. And then we make some really, really poor decisions. And we add to that. And so the paper was just to say, actually, this is not something that is a must. We have agency way more. What might be some things that we, as leaders, but to me, I just think about it just generally as human beings, can do to reject that narrative and say, yes, it might not be, I'm not changing the world and all that kind of other stuff, but in my sphere of influence, how do I be the person that I want to be? What does it matter to me? And how do I continue to stay aligned, as you mentioned, values. What does that mean on a day-to-day basis? So that's kind of where the paper came from. And it was my little act of doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to be in this, getting sucked into this place, right? And what else can we do? So hope that makes sense.
And sometimes, look, this is me speaking as a writer, of course, but sometimes you need to write stuff down to actually figure out what it is that you're actually thinking about something. If you've got all of these random thoughts and you can't quite figure them out, you just sit down and start writing, and it does find its shape and its form, and then you think, oh, right, that's what I think. That makes sense, So perhaps that was your way of going through your own mind and resolving all of these things and putting it down, and then you think, oh yeah, that's it. So, but you've been sharing this now, and it seems to be resonating. So it's obviously not you who's the only one who's thinking this way. Is that correct? You've started to sort of circulate this with other leaders.
Yeah, a little bit. Hasn't been officially fully launched yet, but we're getting there. Right. I actually wanted to do what I was learning about this year, which is all of these things around complexity. So, in complexity, you run little small experiments. You don't actually, there's no analysis and look at the data. That's more in a different side of things. That's the system that we would call complicated. Anyway, we're not going to go into that science, but the idea is that you kind of get engaged in the system and you run little experiments and you try it. So even before I wrote anything, I spoke to a whole bunch of people and sort of said, this is my feeling. This is what I'm thinking is happening. What does that look like to you? And this is from chairs of boards to chairs of mentoring groups of CEOs to lots and lots and lots of leaders. And it seemed to be something that resonated, and that they were like, no, actually, you know what? It's true. Yeah, people are getting sucked into the vortex of negativity and thinking just because it's happening in certain parts of the world, in certain large organizations, and I do think they're under different kind of pressure, and they make some calls that are, because the system is designed that way to prioritize shareholder value and all that kind of other stuff, versus anything else, that the leaders within those organizations are pressured to do more. But it seemed to resonate. And then, wrote the paper and then shared it with a few people who are sort of, key people in my network. And the feeling is like, how do we make this a movement? Right? Okay. And it's not necessarily about anything that I'm saying. It's about, I think everybody can feel that we're just missing that positive positive perspective and an agency perspective, right? Yeah. A feeling like things are not just happening to us. There's things that we can do and that they matter. Even though they might not be big, they matter. Yeah. So we're going to see how we go. Yeah.
Well, look, once it is officially launched, everybody will put links, at the bottom of the podcast and let everybody, have access to it and all of that. So, can you give us a wee preview though? So, I'll tell you. So, I mean, this podcast is, well, as you know, it's called Big Problems, Little Solutions. It's kind of orientated to environmentalism and the climate movement and all of that sort of stuff, and all of the sort of lessons that you're talking about and the things that you've learned, I've learned, probably from big corporates that apply to small to medium organizations as well. And a lot of people in the climate movement are, they work in big organizations, they work in small to medium organizations, but a lot of them are also kind of volunteer organizations, and, perhaps getting, alignment and leadership in some of these sorts of groups is a little trickier. Would you have, a couple of tips that you might be able to pull out of this new piece of work that we could apply to, somebody who's leading a climate movement at the moment, and how they could then, get through this mess that we're living in and lead their people a wee bit better? Have you got a couple of tips for anyone who's listening in on that front?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know that any of the things that I talk about are necessarily just kind of applicable to business, purely because my whole thing is, and maybe this is the engineer and that's the passion for human behavior sort of thing, is like small businesses and organizations, all they really are is they decide what a mission is, what a purpose is, what they're there to do. And then the leaders within them, their job is just, how do I get all these people in the best possible way? And my whole thing is to get them to do their best work for whatever that means for them, get them, in a way that they can still thrive, right? That it's not a resource that we're like ripping everything out of, but we're actually multiplying their impact and tapping into whatever is within that, towards the mission, towards wherever we're going. So
that doesn't mean sleeping at your desk, does it? Not setting up tents in the none of that business, no.
None of that business, chaining people to desks and treating them like children, right? Like, and again, if that worked, maybe it did in factories a long time ago. It's not the world that we live in anymore, right? But so how do we, by what we know about human beings and what makes human beings give us more than just an exchange of time and effort, right? Time for a dollar. How do we get human beings to want to be part of something? That's really my perspective as I kind of go into businesses, right? So then I think the same can kind of be thought about when you think about whether that's a movement or whether that is a non-for-profit or any of that kind of stuff. Ultimately, anyone leading within that still has to, really their job is to move humans in a specific direction, right? So, I don't know, in my mind, there's nothing that's specific kind of to business, I guess, from that. But, people can be the judge of that, I guess, whether it's useful or not. And by the way, this is kind of like learning from the leadership and business side of things and transference into environmentalist. A lot of the inspiration for me has been actually the environment world as well, right? Because how do we stay positive? How do we stay in the right mindset, all that kind of other stuff. The quote that's on my wall and that I just looked up, that's kind of been my thing all day, is from David Orr, right? Who's well-known environmentalist. And he's like, hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up, right? Hope is an act. It is something that we do together. Anyway, sorry, sidebar. But I'd probably say, so there's 4 things that I kind of think about within the white paper, and it's just a high level. Number 1, and I think it's within any movement and any of that kind of other stuff, and just even thinking through that specific quote that I just shared, how do we actually stay regulated ourselves? How do we stay on mission? How do we stay on purpose? How do we stay that? We are as I mentioned earlier, biology. We're just a human animal, right? Yes. That has its limitations.
And unpredictable and a bit of a mess most of the time. Yes.
100%. Yeah. And we have this tricky nervous system, right? That when it is stressed and pushed or threatened, and threats are anything from a social interaction to, something chasing us.
AI's coming to take
our
your
brain
job.
Doesn't know. Yeah, absolutely. All of those things are kind of considered the same thing in the brain, which is strange, right? But what happens is our nervous system reacts in a way that it just shuts down any creative thinking. It shuts down any ability to make good decisions. It really limits us in terms of how we can then show up. So the first piece is actually realizing that and working with the limitations, and then figuring out what that is for ourselves so we can stay centered, we can stay grounded, we can look after this biology in a world that we weren't really designed for, right? I said something the other day. I was talking to my sister. I'm like, we're like a Fiat Punto. I don't know, you know, maybe in Europe, but that's driving the Autobahn, right? Like at all times. And so how do we get that Fiat Punto? So what are the things that we can do to look after ourselves? I think is the first piece, right?
Because if
you're
we
going
don't
to lead anyone.
If we don't, we're in a position where we're making bad decisions.
We're getting sucked into that scarcity, we're making decisions out of threat.
Yeah.
100%. And our ability to there's a woman called Jennifer Garvey-Berger who's a coach, and they've written this book called about unleashing your complexity genius. So how do we as leaders do well in complexity? Because they talk about it being our birthright. We're actually good at this. We're good at heart, complex and certain things, but our nervous system in it can kind of hijack our ability to deal well with these problems. So first is kind of regulating ourselves and figuring it out. The second thing I think is just this consistent idea, and I don't think anyone in the environment movement actually needs this tip, because I think they live it regularly, which is knowing that the little things that we do make a big difference. We have agency in the future. The future is nothing but something we create through little steps that we take or not take as we go forward. Some people talk about it, I love some authors that talk about we live in other people's imagination today. Like our reality is just something that someone else imagined and came to put together. So what would it look like if we were reimagining it? So environmental, I think people in that space and who are activists and working within it, I think know that really, really well. And it's just reminding ourselves that we have that agency. The third, I think, in that movement is just being very clear of a mission. And, in business world, we talk about it, purpose, mission, values, and all that kind of other stuff. Yeah. Because we might not know what the world is going to look like, but these things, identity, knowing who we are, how we're going to show up. So this is where the behaviors, I think, and values still make sense. I think in any movement, we should have a chat about who we are, why are we here, and how are we going to do this? Yeah. And getting people to opt in or opt out of that. And then making sure that language is consistent and it's showing up in how we are working every single day. I still think it's useful.
If we are dealing with this ridiculously uncertain world, you never know what's coming up round the next corner. But if you know what your values and your personality are, I guess, then you know that you'll react in a certain way. So, if an employee is looking for a company that will react in a way that values its employees, then they can choose to work there. And then no matter what happens, they know that's the way that this company will react. And there are lots of organisations out there which are quite obviously, I won't mention any, but not choosing that route. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I guess, that the values piece can help you decide how this company will react in an uncertain future.
100%. Amy Edmondson, who's a researcher in psychological safety, talks about it, that the values and the purpose in that becomes your compass. So you don't know what you don't have a map because you can't know what the world's going to look like. But this thing is going to show you that way, because exactly as you said, these are the tools, if they're done right, these are the ways that we make a decision about what the next best step is, right? Which is in complexity, all you can do. Like, what is the next best step that I can take towards a direction that I want to go to? Yeah. So I, to be fair, and this is no shade on anyone, right? But like, I have seen though, no matter how much, even in movements, we say we are inclusive. We say, or non-for-profits who are deeply purpose-driven. But when we're not spending enough time, we can get out of alignment sometimes, right? And I think this is where conflict happens. And this is where, even though if we're going in the same direction, if we're not working in the way that we want to, people opt out because they're like, hold on, but we say we're this, but we're right now behaving in a completely different way.
And that's one thing that people are extremely good at, is determining whether you are sticking to what you said you were going to do. People can very, very accurately judge bullshit or not, really.
Bullshit detectors, spidey senses, however you want to call it. We're really good at that. Kids are good at that as well. Really good at that. So
that's the third one. That's great. Third one. And you said there's a fourth?
There's a fourth one. And I'm more focused, as I said, this was sort of talking about how to working in business. But I think really what the principle was, and it was this whole idea, what does it mean to engage people? Because I think we all think in business that it's about like just making it really nice, really caring for your people, being highly empathetic, and, as I think I've heard you mention before, like, pool tables and all that kind of other stuff.
Give them a free gym membership and, a day off on their birthday. Everybody work from
home all the time. All that kind of other stuff. And we know it's more than that. Like, we humans are actually designed to want to do hard things. And we want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Like, everyone from Maslow to self-determination theory of human motivation, everything has told us that. Like, we have tons of evidence. So how do we, while supporting and caring for people, so the support is there, also challenge each other to be part of something bigger than ourselves? And I think environmental movements are really designed for that. All of this, though, to me comes from is, if you are leading a movement, I guess the first principle of even just thinking about that is the fact that I think you just have to be a little bit more curious about how people work. You're not going to get anywhere on your own. Your passion and all the data and technical information about what you know about what we need to change and how we need to behave and what needs to be, how much renewable energy should we be using and all the best composting techniques, whatever is your jam and your area is great, but it's not the thing that moves people. And so if you actually want to lead a movement, I would just say start with just a little bit more curiosity about what gets people going. There's tons of that information in, lots of science and everything else. And then being aware of that as you are trying to create that movement, get people going in the same direction. What is it that human beings need? So just staying a little bit more curious about humans, which is frustrating on top of everything else that you have to do, but I think it's a necessity.
That's brilliant. And look, I think that's a great place to leave it. What on earth do human beings want? Really, that's the question.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But a livable planet would be nice for a start anyway. So, but listen, Maja, thank you very much for your time today. That's great. And do let us know when the white paper is out. We'll share it with the audience as well. And
thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much for your time.
And thanks, Barry, so much for your help on getting it together as well. It's been really invaluable. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Okay. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks again for watching. And don't forget to share these little solutions far and wide.